In the spring of 1956, a young actress sat across from a doctor in a small office on the MGM lot. The room smelled like leather and aftershave. A brass nameplate on the desk read, Dr. Eugene Hirsch, studio physician. She had gained 4 pounds since her last weigh-in. The doctor did not ask her how she felt. He asked her what her next picture was. She told him. He nodded, pulled open a drawer, and wrote something on a small white pad. He tore the paper along the perforated edge and slid it across the desk. She picked it up. The handwriting was illegible, the way all prescriptions looked. He told her to take one in the morning, one at lunch. Nothing after 3 p.m. or she would not sleep. She folded the paper and put it in her purse. She thanked him. She left. She filled the prescription at the pharmacy on Sunset Boulevard before she went home. The label on the amber bottle said Dexedrine, 5 mg. She did not know what that meant. She knew it would keep her from being hungry. That bottle was not unusual. By the mid-1950s, nearly every major Hollywood studio employed doctors who operated out of small offices tucked into corners of the lot. These were not general practitioners in the traditional sense. They did not treat colds or set broken bones. They managed weight. They managed energy. They managed the physical appearance of the talent under contract, and they did it with prescription pads that never seemed to run out. The actresses who walked through those doors were not patients in the way we understand patients. They were studio assets being maintained according to the terms written into the contracts they had signed, contracts that specified weight limits, waist measurements, and periodic check-ins to ensure compliance. The doctor's office was not a place you went when you were sick. It was a place you went when the studio said you needed to go. The pills they prescribed were amphetamines, Benzedrine, Dexedrine, Dexamyl, Albuterol. These were not experimental substances. They were FDA-approved medications, legally manufactured by pharmaceutical companies and marketed to physicians as appetite suppressants and energy enhancers. Benzedrine had been introduced in the 1930s as a nasal decongestant. By the 1940s, doctors had observed its side effects, decreased appetite and heightened alertness, and began prescribing it for weight control. By the 1950s, it was routine. A 1958 medical journal estimated that nearly 3.5 billion amphetamine tablets were being manufactured annually in the United States. A significant portion of those tablets were prescribed to women, many of them young women, many of them in Los Angeles, many of them working in front of cameras under contracts that made their continued employment contingent on maintaining a specific silhouette. Here's what those pills did. Amphetamines stimulate the central nervous system. They increase the release of dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain, which suppresses appetite and creates a sensation of energy and focus. A woman who took a 5 mg tablet of Dexedrine at 8 a.m. would not feel hungry until well past noon. She would feel awake, alert, capable of moving through a 12-hour shooting day without the need for food or rest. The hunger signal that would ordinarily arrive around 10 a.m. simply did not arrive. The exhaustion that might have set in after 6 hours on set in full costume under stage lights never appeared. She did not eat because she did not want to eat. The pill had removed the wanting, but the system did not stop at appetite suppression. Stay with this part because the cycle matters. The same amphetamines that kept her awake and alert during the day made sleep nearly impossible at night. A woman who took her last Dexedrine at 2 p.m. would still feel its effects at midnight. Her heart would still be racing. Her mind would still be moving. Sleep, which should have come naturally after a 14-hour workday, became something she had to pursue. And so the same studio doctor who had prescribed the amphetamines would prescribe something else. Seconal, Nembutal, Barbiturates, central nervous system depressants designed to counteract the stimulants she had taken earlier. She would take the pills to stay thin and awake. Then she would take pills to sleep. Then she would wake up exhausted from the barbiturates and take more amphetamines to function. The cycle was chemical and it was prescribed. The most disturbing part of this system was not that it existed. It was that it was considered normal. Magazine articles from the era occasionally mentioned that certain actresses took vitamin shots or energy supplements to maintain their schedules. The language was always vague, always sanitized. What those articles did not mention was that the vitamin shots often contained methamphetamine, and the energy supplements were pharmaceutical-grade stimulants powerful enough to eliminate hunger for an entire day. The women receiving these prescriptions did not think of themselves as addicted. Addiction was something that happened to people who took drugs recreationally, who sought pills for pleasure. She was taking what her doctor prescribed. She was following medical advice. She was doing what the studio required her to do in order to keep working. In 1947, a contract player at Warner Brothers was called into the studio doctor's office after a routine weigh-in showed she had gained 6 pounds. The doctor did not ask if she had been eating differently or if something had changed in her life. He told her the studio had noticed. He told her it needed to be corrected. He wrote a prescription for thyroid extract, a medication designed for people with hypothyroidism, a condition she did not have. Thyroid hormone artificially increases the body's metabolic rate, forcing it to burn more calories at rest. It also increases heart rate, causes tremors, and can lead to bone loss if taken long-term by someone whose thyroid function is normal. She took it for 3 months. The weight came off. The prescription was refilled. She took it for another year. Nobody told her to stop. Nobody asked if she felt well. The studio weigh-ins continued every 2 weeks, and as long as the number stayed where it was supposed to stay, the system worked. What the contract said mattered more than what her body said. The standard studio contract of the 1950s included morality clauses, appearance clauses, and weight requirements that were reviewed and enforced at regular intervals. A typical clause read something like this. The artist agrees to maintain her weight at no more than 115 pounds and her waist measurement at no more than 22 inches for the duration of this agreement. Failure to comply may result in suspension without pay. The consequences were not abstract. Suspension meant no income. It meant no screen time. It meant the studio could replace her with someone who would comply, and in an era when thousands of young women arrived in Los Angeles every year hoping to be discovered, replacements were not difficult to find. The choice was not between taking the pills and not taking the pills. The choice was between taking the pills and losing everything. This is where the story shifts, because what Hollywood built in the 1950s did not disappear. It adapted. In 1959, the FDA began tightening regulations on amphetamine prescriptions. By the late 1960s, the cultural conversation around diet pills had started to change. Doctors became more cautious. Studios became more careful about what could be traced back to them. The prescriptions did not stop, but they became quieter. The same substances were repackaged. Amphetamines became diet aids. Thyroid extract became metabolic support. Barbiturates became sleep aids. The language changed. The chemistry did not. By the 1970s, the wellness industry had arrived. The word wellness itself became a category, a way of talking about weight control and energy management without using the language of medicine. The pills that Hollywood studio doctors had prescribed in small offices on studio lots were now sold over the counter at pharmacies under names that sounded less clinical. Dexatrim, Metabolife, Hydroxycut. The active ingredients were often chemically similar to what had been prescribed 30 years earlier, but now they came in bottles with labels that said natural and herbal and clinically tested. A woman in 1975 who bought a bottle of diet pills at the drugstore did not think of herself as taking what a studio doctor would have given an actress in 1955. But functionally, the transaction was nearly identical. The only difference was who signed the prescription. The modern version of this system is worth $70 billion annually. That is the global weight loss supplement industry. It sells pills, powders, teas, and injections designed to suppress appetite, increase metabolism, and deliver energy. Some of these products contain stimulants that are chemically similar to amphetamines. Some contain thyroid hormone analogs. Some contain caffeine in doses high enough to produce the same jittery wakefulness that Benzedrine produced in 1956. The labels have changed. The regulatory language has changed. The marketing has become more sophisticated. But the fundamental transaction, exchanging money for a substance that removes hunger, has not changed at all. Here is what that young actress in 1956 did not know. She did not know that the pill she was taking was the same substance being given to soldiers during World War II to keep them awake on long missions. She did not know that the pharmaceutical company manufacturing it had explicitly marketed it to doctors as a tool for weight reduction in women. She did not know that the long-term effects of taking amphetamines daily for months or years included dependency, cardiovascular strain, and psychological effects that would not become widely documented until decades later. She knew that the studio had told her to lose weight. She knew the doctor had given her something that worked. She knew that if she did not take it, someone else would take her roles. What kept surfacing when I traced this timeline carefully was not that the women who took these pills lacked discipline. It was that the industry had built a system in which discipline was chemically unnecessary. Hunger was not something you resisted. It was something you eliminated. The bottle on the vanity table next to the lipstick and the powder compact was doing the work that the culture now insists should be done with willpower, meal planning, and self-control. She did not have more discipline than women today. She had a prescription that made discipline irrelevant. And here's the part that stays with me. When that system was eventually criticized, when the cultural conversation around amphetamines shifted in the 1960s and 1970s, the criticism was often directed at the women who had taken the pills, not the doctors who prescribed them or the studios that demanded compliance. The narrative became one of vanity, of actresses so obsessed with their appearance that they resorted to dangerous substances. That framing erased the contracts. It erased the weigh-ins. It erased the fact that these were not choices made in pursuit of personal perfection. They were choices made under institutional pressure, choices that came with paychecks attached, choices between compliance and unemployment. The studio doctor's office closed decades ago. The contracts no longer include explicit weight clauses, at least not in writing. But the infrastructure that made those offices necessary has not disappeared. It has diffused into a culture that now sells the same substances without a prescription, that markets appetite suppression as empowerment, that frames hunger elimination as a wellness practice rather than a medical intervention. The young woman standing in the supplement aisle in 2026, reading the label on a bottle that promises to curb cravings and boost energy, is making a choice that looks nothing like sitting in a studio doctor's office in 1956. But the chemical transaction, the trade of money for the removal of hunger, is structurally identical. The only thing that has changed is who profits from it. There is a photograph somewhere of a dressing room table in the late 1950s. Lipstick, powder, a hand mirror, a comb, and in the back corner, partially obscured by a silk scarf, a small amber prescription bottle. The label has faded. The name on it is not visible, but the bottle is there, just out of focus, doing its job the way it did every morning for years. She did not call it a diet. The studio did not call it a problem. The doctor called it treatment. The system called it necessary. And for a long time, nobody called it anything else. If something in this landed, if it felt like a story you already knew but had never quite heard out loud, subscribe. The next video goes somewhere quieter. A contract signed in 1953. A girl who thought she was being given an opportunity. What she was actually signing. I will see you there.